And we have Councilman Pridemore and Hagar with us, and we thank them for being here. And Darren, if you want to introduce yourself and your colleagues.
All right. Yes, our Chief of Administration, Mr. John Hudson, is sitting here, and our Director of Finance, Mr. Pete Lutz. And I have several members, most of the members of our executive management group up here as well. So I'll save a few minutes by not introducing them all. So.
Okay. Well, let me just start with, during last year's budget, we put, I think, $1.5 million in the budget sort of to do long-range planning for where you are with facilities. Could you tell us how that study's going and if you got any results, what we're looking at?
Yeah, we've probably spent the majority of our available time in the last year really working on that with some of the experts and spending, I guess, every week or so kind of getting updates. And so I understand or hope that the results are finalized here in the next couple of weeks and will be presented to you, and kind of anxious to see that in writing. But we've had some preliminary findings and some information been provided to us along the way. I don't think some of this doesn't surprise those of us who are in and out of the downtown facilities, but you remember having been in and out of those years ago. It's been the building was built in 1982, the CJC, and to be honest with you, that's over 30 years of life, and most jails in the country are 3 times the normal use of life when you're using them the way we have. And so we believe it's over 100 years old. I think the expert and the reports are going to indicate that to renovate those facilities to keep them operational is going to be an extremely expensive thing to do. Just to think of CJC alone for a second, the plumbing is in the tens of millions of dollars to renovate and to update that. Primarily because it was built with very small PVC plumbing when it was built in '82, and it has had extraordinary use, as you can imagine, for the last 30 plus years. But that's just one piece of it. The part that I think we all need to be prepared to read and hear about is that the elevator system, the fire alarm system, the security electronics inside that facility, they have all exceeded their end of life, and it's time that we're going to have to do something significant in the CJC. My belief and estimate would be somewhere in the $50 to $60 million in CJC alone.
For renovations? Renovation
in that one building. One thing that I wasn't prepared for was that if you're going to renovate the building, that one alone, you're going to have to move the inmates out of it while you do it. That's just unheard of in the way that we'd have to do that. Each cell has plumbing built in it, and you couldn't have all the construction going on with inmates living there. So we'd actually have to probably contract out those inmates for the year or so it would take to do the work. That's an additional $7 million on top of the 50+ million just to renovate the building. So my estimates, and I haven't seen this yet officially, but it is somewhere in the 60 to 65 million in CJC alone. The Hill Detention Building down the street, our other facility, as we used to call the Blackwoods Jail in some days, is an additional 15 million or so to get it up to standards to maintain that facility. We were also occupying, as you used to call it, the workhouse over on South 5th Street. Our training and our warrant divisions and so forth are located over there. That building, believe it or not, exceeds what the CJC's utilities are just to run it for our staff. It's so out of date. It was closed by the federal court. We've used it for office buildings ever since, and it really needs to be upgraded substantially to keep it operational. No inmates live there, but our staff do. A very large part of our organization is located on South 5th Street. We also have the trial lawyers building that's right across the road here with a lot of our support staff built inside that building. That building doesn't have sprinklers. It's really barely, and it shouldn't be occupied very long, and it would take an additional $5 million to get that building up to maintaining for a length of time. One thing that jumped off the page at us was that our utility and maintenance cost downtown to run our jails is about $2 million a year, which exceeds anything you would build or you would renovate today. Things that are going on inside that facility that worry me.
$2 million a year to operate?
Yes, that's the utility maintenance cost a year in our jail facilities, which exceeds the extreme of what a new facility or a renovated facility would cost to do it. There's no secret. These buildings are very old. They weren't built when they were built with what I think today's efficiencies should be. Our staff, as we speak, we don't have a fire alarm system in a jail, and that's just very dangerous. Our officers are having to go do fire watch. They walk down to make sure there isn't a fire, come back, and I mean, that was better in 1982 than it is today.
Before they built the building?
Before they built the building. You just wouldn't be doing it that way. The electronic system is out of date and cannot be replaced, and that you have to totally renovate the fire alarm system. There's some things going on over there from a security standpoint that I don't really want to report publicly because it would put our staff at risk, but it's not the way we would want to operate those facilities. We're having to manually move inmates because our elevators don't work. We have 4 elevators. I don't think there's ever been a day where they've all 4 worked in the last 10 years. We're down to the last 1 or 2 of them operating, depending on how we can hold that together. Therefore, you're paying officers to escort inmates that really should be going without having to manually transport each of them. So I think the bottom line is something really desperately needs to be done. I feel confident that the report is going to indicate that downtown facilities are going to be an expensive proposition to renovate, and if that's what the city chooses to do, we need to be prepared for what that number may be. And I would estimate it's in near the $100 million mark to get everybody downtown up to grade.
That $100 million would be the Criminal Justice Center renovations, the $15 million for the H.G. Hill building?
H.G. Hill.
And what do you estimate the workhouse?
I think it's 9 to 11 million is what I've been hearing from them. There's some more, and there's another 5 to 6 in the trial lawyers building. Mm-hmm. And the number I've been hearing is rounding $100 million by the time. And I think you and I agree a year ago now, something has to be done. And this effort was to find out what it would cost to do what we need to do.
Right. And optimally, do you build a building that requires elevators that is multiple stories, or?
When I tell people around the country to do what I do, that I'm still in downtown facilities where our kitchen is on the bottom floor and everything above a kitchen is not what you'd want. Our flooding, I don't know if you remember, we've been in twice in the last year. We've shut the entire facility down, couldn't book prisoners because the water and everything else is leaking all through the building, and we shut down our facilities. You don't build high-rise institutions in what we do anymore for a couple of reasons. One of those is what I just said, elevators are bad. The kitchen facilities, you don't want to have to put in a system like that. But to be honest with you, staff efficiency. You want to be able to observe more people with fewer officers. And our building is built with floors on top of one another, and you can't really manually supervise inmates without having to be right in front of them. And so I don't think anybody would be surprised if you took that same building and redesigned it and built it. I think you're saving $2 to $3 million a year in just staff cost alone, and that's just my estimates, knowing what we could do in a new facility.
Just off of efficiencies?
Just off the staff efficiency alone, and that's not maintenance and utility costs. Our staff alone, again, we're paying officers to walk down and see if there's a fire in a unit, and you shouldn't be doing that. That's an automated system nowadays that would be much more efficient than that.
All right. And so if you did renovate the building, presumably there's no way on that acreage that you have underneath the building that you could build a building that was not multiple stories.
Right. We don't have the land to do that downtown, and nor, to be honest with you, years ago this was looked into. You couldn't even expand if the city ever needed to. If you spent that much money in that building, you actually do not grow your population. You can't expand down the road, and you also wouldn't be able to do anything that the system really doesn't have today. Our booking room has never been expanded over the years. It's been since 1982. And the city's moved in all sorts of directions, and so we're landlocked in that building. And again, where I'm located down the street in the Hill building as well, you can't grow the facility. And even if you spend all of this money to upgrade them to just keep them what I consider to be constitutional and safe and secure going forward, you're not reaching the entire building being renovated. Those are just the essential functions that are messed up today. We don't feel like, and I think our staff would tell you this, that that the facility was not very well designed when it was built. Visitation in that facility is terrible. You have families having to come downtown, pay to park, walk up inside the institution, get into the belly of the jail, and then visit through glass. It is very, very
I've done that
You've done that.
as an attorney. Yeah. I've done that. Yes.
But it's not. It just really isn't the way we do our business anymore in a downtown urban area. Bringing all that to it, and then have high-rise institutions, stuck inside of. And I think we need to be better as a city and get that building where the staff and the inmates alone have a better place to work and live.
Okay. And you think that a modern facility would, I guess the advantages would be it gives you the opportunity for further expansion over time as the city grows and changes. It saves you somewhere between around $2 million in operational costs.
Right.
And those are fixed costs that we have every year that come out of the operational budget as the city. It's not a capital cost.
That's right. And I think there's two pieces. My estimates would be in the $1 million range of savings on utility maintenance costs. And I think there's a $2 million savings on staff efficiencies alone, because I know we would have fewer staff to do what we're having to do today. And then that doesn't include what I consider to be some morale-related issues and the overall issues the staff deal with in living there every day. The liability for the city going forward. You and I lived here when that jail was not managed correctly, and the city's paid an inordinate amount of money to bring it up to par, and I would just hate to see us ever go back.
And in terms of the location, obviously one of the, I guess you could argue, one of the attractions of its current location, and perhaps an argument for renovation, is that it's directly across the street from the criminal justice courts and very near to the Ben West building, which also has criminal justice functions going on there, and lawyers, the downtown location. How does that factor into all that?
I spent a lot of time the last year talking to colleagues around the country. I think it's the technology of today, and I think just the way we do business today. You don't need to be located next to, co-located, if you will, next to the courthouse anymore. We have a duty and responsibility to have the inmates in court on time where they need to be. And we're already moving inmates all over. We have sites, as you know, out in the Harding Place area presently. We're moving a lot of folks to get downtown. We've never had trouble doing that. So wherever we would move, my pitch would be, if we were to move, that we stay within the same central area that we're already located. I hate to spread us out even further, but if we ended up in a similar area, there's more savings to the city in that as well. We're already in an area of town moving inmates and moving prisoners. And I just don't think cities like us do not focus on building downtown anymore for a lot of reasons. From a safety standpoint, from where we are, I still believe it's important. Our staff pay, they call it a raise. They get a raise when they work on our outside facilities because they don't have to pay to park. And the visitors to the institutions are coming in and out of there having to pay to park downtown. And as you well know, that burden shouldn't be on the families. I'd like to see them come visit without having to do that. And you get out of the area of the city, and you'd be able to provide visitation for not only attorneys, but families and our own staff. And quite frankly, it's a safer way to do it. We're moving, I think you've heard me years and years ago do this, but we've studied this even recently. About 3 or 4 Thursdays ago, we moved nearly 200 inmates down to the courthouse, and only 55% of those inmates never went to the courtroom. And so the point is, and I'd like to do this, is to sit down and figure out a way where some of that movement of very dangerous people could be reduced, and you could use technology and visitation in various ways where the body doesn't have to physically leave. And we would focus on getting the courts and the lawyers who they really wanted here, but not necessarily those who may be on the dockets that weren't going to be used. And I think we could work towards that wherever we may end up. But I don't think cities like Nashville focus on building downtown, renovating or building new facilities anymore. You just don't hear of that. And I think Nashville has to decide, does it have a location that would work? And my hope is that we stay where we're already, wherever that pack us up and move us together. We've never been centralized. Interesting to think about, but police departments around the country are moving to a decentralizing police, right? Get out into community-based policing. What we do is more centralized today. You do better using the same kitchens and laundries and essential services on one compound than you do if you spread us out and have to hire a kitchen and a laundry everywhere, and the transportation cost of moving everybody around. So we want to be a centralized agency of one day, whereas police seem to want to decentralize, saving the money.
Okay. And so in terms of if you went for an option where you didn't spend the $60 million plus to renovate the CJC, the operational maximum usage of I guess, people's location would mean your staffing areas in the Hill building, the workhouse, and the trial lawyers building would no longer be necessary there?
Right. Yeah, we're paying, if you consolidated all of that, and in my mind, you could build one facility versus two jails. We have a downtown Hill and a CJC. Those two combined into one automatically have savings. We're paying people to work in security in each one of those buildings, corrections in one of those buildings, transportation. And you wouldn't need that number of bodies to do the same job. And if you built that facility with today's standards in mind, you can supervise more inmates with less people. All of that is just dollars and cents staff savings. But we're not, and we're giving up in the South Fifth Street, which doesn't house inmates, but it's a very expensive building to operate. I looked at the utility costs. I was amazed. We're spending as much as a city to operate the workhouse with our staff in it as we are the CJC, which is inefficient in housing inmates. But we, as you know, over the years, we've really never had anything new since 1982 in this city to operate. We've always used what you would call the old warehouse or the workhouse or the grocery store, and it's just time to deal with what I think is a more state-of-the-art environment, I hope, whether it's renovation or relocation.
What functions do you have in the trial lawyers building?
We have our investigations division, we have our communication division, we have our standards and accountability division, which kind of do all of our work. I'd say there's probably 30 staff inside of that building working on every floor. We do our DUI school there, where people come and take classes there. Again, when that building was kind of moved to us 6 or 7, 8 years ago, it really is, it doesn't even have sprinklers. Like I said, it's not a very good place to be, and it was all we had, the city at the time, and that's kind of what happened with the grocery store deal, and the workhouse was shut for inmates, but that's all we had to use for our civil warrant division and all the other functions that we provide, and I think we are on 8 locations sitting here today.
You mentioned that if you renovated the CJC, you couldn't do it leaving the inmates in the CJC. And how many inmates do you have in there now? 700
plus on any given day. It would be a tremendous challenge to do that workaround. I mean, number one, that's the housing number. But if you started renovating it, we don't know exactly how you would book prisoners while you're renovating the upstairs, because you'd have to move them somewhere else. This is a very conservative number. We just did the per diem cost if we had to rent beds while we did the renovation is $7 million a year. It would take every bit of a year to do it, and that operationally, we still don't know how we would do it. I was just trying to give you an estimate of the cost of doing it.
Where would you rent beds? I presume not a local hotel.
Right.
Where would you?
Yeah, and it would have to be through a private provider. We do not have them, nor would the state be able to handle them. So we're talking about either a CCA or one of these national companies that may have available beds, which would be extremely disruptive to the community, because you have the families of those inmates obviously not happy that they would be moved. It wouldn't be here in Nashville.
It'd be out of the county.
Right. We couldn't find 200 or 300 beds, much less the 800. The report and the experts, I think, are also telling me that if they do that renovation in a building that was built in 82, once you do that substantial amount of work, then they have to live by today's construction standards, which reduces our capacity in that building maybe by 200 or 300 people when you finish. So you fix this building that used to house 700 or 800, is now down to holding 500 or 600 after you spent, nearly $70 million to do it. So, it's a big question as to, is that really the way? And you guys, we just want the city and the system to realize something has to be done, and what the option is. And I appreciate the fact that the experts have been working with us, have been fantastic. They've been all over our system, in and out of walls and behind the doors, and looking at everything they can to try to give us the best report. I'm anxious to get that out.
Right, and I mean, this isn't coming as a total surprise to me. Obviously, last year we put $1.5 million in the budget to study this issue because it was a real concern. Let me ask you this. I mean, you can look at, I seem to have spent my entire adult life dealing with jail population issues. But while as mayor, I've had the good fortune that the jail population has been manageable, and we have empty beds, right, and there's flexibility that wasn't there when I was performing other roles, public defender and law director. How would you describe the need for a new facility or very expensive renovations while you have any given day 800 or more beds available?
That's a great question. Yeah, to be honest with you, the city hasn't built the type of bed, the CJC bed, let's call it, in my lifetime here since 1987. The beds that are available today are the lower level security beds. They are, and you're exactly right. I've never been through a mayor that didn't leave with an overcrowding problem, and you're going to leave with, good Lord, 1,500 beds maybe total. But the truth is, this isn't about overcrowding at all, the need that the city has. As a matter of fact, I think we're very lucky that we're not crisis managing this decision. I mean, I really think putting the money in at a time when we weren't, and you've lived here and I have too, when we were just making decisions because it was desperation. I think putting the money in, spending a year to study it, coming out with what's the best options for the city at a time when we can do that on a proactive basis is much smarter. I mean, we'd made decisions in the early 90s because the federal court made us spend money and spend a lot of money in court. And I just think what this is really about is the conditions within our existing system. And we do not need new additional beds. But the beds that the city is going to have to occupy over the next several years are going to have to be dealt with. And so it's not expansion in that way. It's really replacing what we have that really hasn't had any attention in years.
If you were building something new, do you think would we lose beds?
We wouldn't lose any beds. Matter of fact, you would gain handfuls of beds in certain populations. You would have the bed that you need. One of the things that you know about, we talk about a lot in your monthly meetings, but the needs of our inmates have changed dramatically. I mean, the mental health population coming in and out of our system is a real problem every day, and that jail built in 1982 didn't think about mental health. And so if you were to build what you need, you'd know that the estimates of that population, we would add beds that would deal with and treat the issue of mental illness within the jail, which back then we had none of. Females, another issue that we've been challenged with over the years is jails were built, this jail was built really with one thing in mind, housing people. It didn't take into account we'd be housing bound over juveniles, mental health populations, female population growing. So we would grow beds in certain areas, but this whole effort would really be about replacing what we have and making a more efficient system and saving the city money in the long run.
If you were outside the downtown area, how would that impact the operations of the Juvenile Justice Center?
You know, I think we've met with Judge Callaway several times, and I think our numbers of the juvenile population that we interact with are down significantly. We work with them every day, and we would still have a presence. We're going to have to be in the downtown area for various issues that we were dealing with if we were to move. I don't see it impacting us a whole lot. One of the things I would, and the report should indicate too, is the projections of certain populations you would want to think about in your build and what you'd want to do. And again, there's so much out there in the world of technology today that's changing the way that you do business and what we do that I'd love to see the city move in that direction. It doesn't take our ability away from doing it the way we've always done it. But, you know, I think the city needs to look in the future as it relates to those kinds of things. Just a lot of ways to save money. It's expensive to move inmates around town. It's dangerous and expensive. And we're doing that a lot now because we're spread out everywhere. And I don't think that's the best long-term plan for us to be doing what we do.
Okay. Well, I guess we have to receive in the next few weeks the final report, and we can, I think I hear what you're saying. Rich?
Just on the budget, on your operating budget side for a second.
Who cares about that?
We're talking about a lot of big numbers there, and I tried to close my eyes. We do have your operating budget you proposed is pretty flat, not really any improvements, but we do have a pretty significant revenue reduction. Is that tied into the less prisoners or operating?
Yes, I'm glad I would have mentioned that if this other thing just from the last year or so we've been focused on. Yeah, we've been monitoring that for the last several years. The good news is that the decrease, let's just use 1,500 today, the decrease in population over the last 4 or 5 years has caused a significant revenue hit in certain line items. I mean, one of them is obviously contractual. I mean, the federal programs that we've ICE and back in the federal inmates that we house for them presently is significantly down. The inmates that go to the state that they would reimburse us for are down. Phone revenues are down, a lot of those things. But I like to say it this way, if those beds were full, it's about $48 million.
It'd be a bigger problem.
But it is, that's exactly where that's coming from.
That's where it's coming from.
It is.
Yeah.
Good news that we're down, bad news in the revenue line, that's exactly where that is.
It's kind of a good, bad revenue problem to have or something like that.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Sheriff, can you take a second just to recap, and we'll get the report whenever we get the report
Okay.
soon. Clearly, part of that report is going to be the renovation costs associated with these existing facilities and the challenges moving forward, even if you do renovate, associated with those facilities. What other highlights should we anticipate from that report that'll help us help inform us and help make a decision?
One of the things I've been over the years, and you guys, I hope, feel strongly about this. You guys funded a mobile booking unit several years ago. We asked for a grant on the pilot years ago, and then we came up here and said, look, it's working, let's do it again. Funded the mobile booking unit, that put that unit out in the field. And really what that demonstrates is that we are able to, with a more efficient design, get the police officer back in the community much quicker. Right now, we're somewhere around 20 minutes to book a prisoner out in the field in a mobile unit, and downtown's about 86 minutes or 90 minutes if you round.
Say those numbers again?
Yeah, it's about 20 minutes for us to do it the way you'd want to do it, in a more efficient way out in the field with the design, and then downtown parking, getting out, going into booking the way we all, it's about 90 minutes. That's a police officer's time. We're going to be here anyway, but the goal is to get the police officer back in the zone and back in the community quicker. And so if we do it in the field, it's 20, and do it downtown, or excuse me, booking downtown, it's 90. Our belief is the new design, if you do it down away from here, or if you could rebuild this whole thing, you would put police officers back in the streets much quicker.
So the study will look at issues like how we book.
How we book.
Can we book more efficiently?
Right, and save what I think is more than just dollars. It's a public safety function, and that's really what we're trying to be, is the partner to the police to get them back out quicker. And it's very hard to do this in an environment like this, driving downtown, parking downtown, getting out, coming in. I still believe most cities would suggest doing that in another area is the future.
And so the consolidated savings that occur, in a big sense, not just from booking, will be a part of what this study offers to us.
It better be. They've talked about, they've studied it, they know, they've been very helpful. But I mean, just in the feedback, it's been, I've been really impressed with their work, because at the end of the day, they're looking at what is the city's overall mission and goal here. And I think when you look at a building like CJC, it doesn't take long, and I'm talking about those of us, but when you get the experts to walk in here and say you're really dealing with substantial, the plumbing alone is a huge challenge to do. And so I feel strongly that it's going to have some very clear, dollars and cents questions, but more importantly, we have to do something.
Okay. Rich, you got any more? No, sir. All right. Well, thank you all for the great work you do, and thank everybody in your department for what you do. And we look forward to having more discussions when we get the report.
Great. Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Darren.
Appreciate it.